do understand that it exists.
Have you ever thought about marrying?
No. I mean, I've thought, well, no, I don't want to get married. I've been to lots of wonderful weddings, including just last weekend my mother's, which was wonderful and divine. She married her fella Ian, and it's glorious. But I guess I'm just sort of saying, I know some women do have this thing about the dress and the day, and maybe that's partly what's driving it, and partly a desire to say, hey, women can be awesome without men. I understand all of that. I just don't understand marrying yourself.
Do you feel threatened as a man, Peter? We might not need you for anything now.
No, not at all. I mean, a year ago I would have had a different view, but this year, I mean, I've gone through a separation this year with my ex-partner of 18 years, so I understand the underpinnings of it now, particularly as I went through that process, and through that process this year, I came to understand myself a lot more, understand my vulnerabilities, understand my manliness, which sat outside sort of the physical macho-ness that New Zealand men are familiar with. Understand my comfort zones and my own inner happiness. So I've picked up a lot of stretching, meditation, and all of that stuff, which has made me a lot more balanced and at peace with myself. So I understand the underpinnings of it, and like some of the women who have taken this, it's come out of a sad situation. And that's been the catalyst of it. But so I understand the underpinnings. However, I'm not too sure whether I'll marry myself. I think I'm happy. I'm happy in my inner self. But yeah, I'm not too sure whether.
Well, it opens up a whole can of worms, doesn't it? I mean, can you cheat on yourself? Can you have a twosome? Is it really a threesome? I mean, for God's sake, it could be. They do say it's better to have loved and lost. So maybe it's better to have married and lost than just have been married to yourself. I don't know. It's very, very bizarre. Right, so on to something far more serious and how to cook pasta. Thanks to the internet, we've now discovered that we've been draining our pasta incorrectly for years. Do you say pasta or pasta, Tracy?
I say pasta.
I say pasta.
Oh, I better do that. Maybe it's an Auckland thing or oh no, one of you's in Wellington.
I'm in Wellington.
Oh, it might be a North Island thing then. I will adjust and say pasta. We've now discovered that we've been draining our pasta incorrectly. And it always makes me think of someone in the church when I say that. Anyway, an updated version of using the strainer by placing it directly onto the pot and then tipping out the liquid into the sink has surfaced online, and it's just sent people into a spin. It's the latest revelation about age-old techniques that we've apparently been doing wrongly, being exposed online by people who have got far too much time on their hands. But does this actually make sense when you see it? So now we've got to get people at home to use their imaginations here. I don't need to really, because Mum always used to do it. It was a pain for spaghetti because some would escape. But how do you drain your pasta, Tracy?
Ellie, don't. I'm trying hard to care about this, but I can't even.
Okay, good on. Some stories are just too silly even
Tell
for the
us
panel.
about Sven.
Yeah, no, we'll try and get to Sven if we can. Oh, look, there's the music. All right, 30 seconds, but quicker than that. How do you drain your pasta, Peter?
No, my ex-partner used to drain my pasta for me, and so I haven't had pasta for the past 12 months.
Okay, good on you. Perfect out. Thanks very much, Peter Fuffy. Lovely to have you on the program.
Thank
Tracy
you.
Bridges as well.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Ellie. Thanks,
I'll be
Tracy.
back with you tomorrow, and it is a minute to 5. John.
We all know what she meant, and here I am. Tonight, New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters goes speed dating with Billing's Jacinda Ardern. And also, before them, and this is important, the Pike River families. The Deputy Chair of Auckland Council's own Finance Committee says it's unacceptable the council blew its wage budget for the 3rd year in a row. A lot more people earning salaries of more than $200,000. We look at that. The girlfriend of Las Vegas gunman Stephen Paddock returns from the Philippines for questioning and tells the FBI she had no idea whatsoever he was planning a massacre. The Kiwis Rugby League World Cup campaign is in disarray after players appear to make a secret pact to play for Tonga. And is Masterton the most beautiful city in New Zealand?
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina bat in a ho. Winston Peters says he's in a no-win position and having to choose between National or Labour to govern the country. The New Zealand First Leader met the leaders of the two main parties today in separate quick-fire meetings, National in the morning and Labour this afternoon. Mr Peters says the preliminary talks did not include any discussions around policy but set out protocols for the official negotiations that will begin after the election results are confirmed and the special vote count is revealed on Saturday. Mr Peters says his party is in a tough position.
Well, it's, between the devil and the deep blue sea here. Not in terms of the political parties, but we just can't win. You can't win with the public, you can't win with the media, you can't win with the commentariat, you can't win with people who believe it's all about first past the post, even though they're in an MMP environment, and they just bang on day in, day out.
Winston Peters says he'll stick to his self-imposed deadline of confirming a deal either way by next Thursday. In Las Vegas, the police have revealed Stephen Paddock spent a decade amassing his arsenal of weapons and lived a secret life before becoming America's worst mass murderer. At a news conference this afternoon, Sheriff Joseph Lombardo confirmed that 317 of the 489 people wounded or injured in the shooting and the subsequent panic have now been discharged from hospitals. 58 people died when Paddock fired hundreds of bullets at fans attending a country music festival. Mr Lombardo says the gunman meticulously planned his attack and he believes he may have had help from others.
What we know is Stephen Paddock is a man who spent decades acquiring weapons and ammo and living a secret life, much of which will never be fully understood. He meticulously planned on the worst domestic attack in United States history.
Joseph Lombardo says Paddock may have been planning to escape instead of shooting himself dead. The sheriff also confirmed the gunman rented a room at a hotel near a Lorde concert in Las Vegas a week before the massacre. The Life is Beautiful concert was headlined by the New Zealand singer and Chance the Rapper. Mr Lombardo did not say whether the concert was Paddock's initial target, but revealed the Ogden Hotel where he stayed is a focus of the inquiry and items have been recovered. Meanwhile, Paddock's girlfriend has said she had no idea what her kind, caring, quiet partner was planning. Mary Lou Danley, who spoke to the FBI on Wednesday after travelling back voluntarily from a holiday in the Philippines, expressed shock at the horrible, unspeakable acts of violence Paddock had committed. Through her lawyer, she said she was duped into flying to the Philippines on a cheap ticket 2 weeks ago. The 62-year-old Australian citizen who was born in the Philippines says she thought Paddock was going to break up with her when he enticed her out of the US with a plane ticket, then wired money to her in the Philippines to buy a house. A 14-metre whale has been removed from the bow of a container vessel in Tauranga Harbour. The dead whale, believed to be a Brutus whale, was partly visible on the ship as it came into harbour yesterday. A dock spokeswoman says its staff worked with iwi to remove the carcass from the ship. It's not known when the collision was with the vessel, which had travelled from Brisbane, occurred. The Chief Executive of the Waikato District Health Board, Nigel Murray, has quit following an investigation into his overspending. The DHB says it's accepted Dr Murray's resignation with immediate effect on the basis he repays the money involved. Sarah Robson has more.
An independent inquiry found Dr Murray had spent more than an agreed $25,000 allocated for relocation costs. There were also other unauthorised expenses involving potential financial breaches of his obligations. The DHB says the findings of the investigation won't be released publicly. The State Services Commissioner, Peter Hughes, says he expects senior leaders of government agencies to demonstrate the highest standards of integrity and conduct at all times, especially in relation to the use of taxpayers' money. Audit New Zealand is carrying out a separate inquiry looking at the Waikato DHB's processes to see if they need to be improved. Ko Sarah Robson, aho.
The country's highest court has been told dropping charges against the boss of the Pike River mine arose from an unlawful bargain. Lawyers for Anna Osborne and Sonia Rockhouse, who both lost family members in the 2010 explosion, today asked the Supreme Court to issue a declaration along those lines, but they don't want the charges to be relayed. 12 health and safety charges were laid against the mine boss, Peter Whittle, relating to the deaths of 29 men in the explosion, but they were dropped after more than than $3 million was paid to the victims' families. Nigel Hampton, the lawyer for Anna Osborne and Sonia Rockhouse, told the court the use of such a payment to end a prosecution was a matter of considerable public importance. The Supreme Court reserved its decision. It's 5:05. To sport, and the Kiwis Rugby League World Cup campaign is in disarray, with coach David Kidwell admitting he was blindsided by the star forwards Jason Taumalolo's defection to Tonga. Kidwell today named a squad which includes 5 debutants for the tournament to be jointly hosted by New Zealand, Australia and Papua New Guinea. Star forward Taumalolo is one of several players who were expected to be among the Kiwis' ranks but have defected to Tonga. Kidwell says he made several unsuccessful attempts to contact Taumalolo to confirm his World Cup plans.
That's the most disappointing thing. I respect his decision, but I think, a conversation between myself and him would have been a good thing to do. And as far as we were concerned, Jason was part of our World Cup team.
Kiwis coach David Kidwell. It's 5 years since New Zealand last won netball's Constellation Cup, but the Commonwealth Games remain the priority for Silver Ferns coach Janine Southby. The 4-test series, which is netball's equivalent of rugby's Bledisloe Cup, starts tonight in Auckland. New Zealand trounced Australia by 10 goals in last month's encounter in Invercargill to win the quad series, and are expecting a torrid game tonight as the Diamonds seek revenge. However, Southby says while they're determined to win the series, next year's April Commonwealth Games remains the priority, and she'll continue to try players in a variety of positions. That's the news.
He was a sick man, a demented man, a lot of problems, I guess.
Back then, to come out and need to address a mass shooting spree was practically unheard of. But over the last decade, things have changed.
Let's start to issue warnings about travel to the USA. The world deserves better from the so-called world leader, the USA, and the sooner the better.
In touch with the world, Susie Ferguson and Guy Aspinall, Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, calls for New Zealand to take a lead in the Pacific in the fight against wildlife trafficking, including the illegal trade in ivory. And after 10, actor Timothy Spall on bringing magic to life in Christchurch as his most evil character yet. He plays Carmody Brack in the film adaptation of Margaret Mahy's The Changeover. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, fine spells and isolated showers. Waikato to Taranaki and Taupo, including Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods with a few showers, more frequent during the afternoons and evenings. Isolated heavy showers possible today. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, increasing fine breaks today. The odd shower developing later tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, a few showers, clearing most places this evening, mainly fine tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, fine breaks but isolated showers as well. Patchy rain developing later tomorrow. Canterbury becoming fine this afternoon. Patchy rain developing later tomorrow. Otago and Southland, mainly fine. Scattered rain developing later tomorrow. Bulla to Fiordland, mainly fine, but a few showers for Bulla. Rain or showers spreading elsewhere tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands, fine breaks. It's almost 5:09, and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. Coming up on the program tonight, the wage bill at Auckland Council, Stephen Paddock's Arsenal, and we talked to a concert goer who stayed amongst the wounded as the bullets kept coming and risked his life to save theirs. Quite extraordinary interview with that man. Also tonight, Theresa May's speech, and Rex Tillerson stands by his man. But first, Winston Peters had his first post-election meetings with the leaders of National and Labour at Parliament today. Bill English and his team met with Mr Peters this morning, Jacinda Ardern and her team this afternoon. Both meetings followed an earlier one with Pike River families. More on that coming up. But our political editor Craig McCulloch spent the day camped out around Parliament.
Just hold it, Dorothy. There's a very important thing I want to say to you.
Winston Peters holding court at Parliament, in and out of elevators and dressing down reporters in between meetings.
You're carrying on this behaviour in the most irresponsible fashion. And with the greatest of help, I'm being very kind, just even talking to you right now about the matter.
Today's talks were short and sharp, 30 minutes apiece with both National and Labour, and purely covering logistics.
And all I'm asking you guys is trying to follow the script here, which is pretty clear. You can work it out for yourselves.
The discussions didn't cover policy. There was no time for negotiations, just enough for an agreement on the general ground rules.
You want to know what the protocols are? Well, they're not complicated.
First, the location. Formal talks with the National and Labour will take place at a meeting room in Parliament on neutral ground. The negotiating teams will rotate in experts to discuss key issues, and everyone involved has agreed to a guarantee of confidentiality.
Well, otherwise, we may as well hire the Westpac Stadium and turn on the lights and turn on the loudspeakers and just go for it. Now, we're not going to have that sort of circus.
National leader Bill English brought along his senior MPs Stephen Joyce, Jerry Brownlee and Todd McClay, as well as the outgoing Chief of Staff Wayne Eagleson. The National MPs stopped on their way into the Beehive this morning, were tight-lipped about their approach.
Well, I hear there's some tea-making duties, so maybe I'll go along.
See you later. Bye. Have a good day.
Popping up to see the Prime Minister.
I'm off to the gym.
Labour fronted Jacinda Ardern, her deputy Calvin Davis and finance man Grant Robertson. Also in the room, the former Deputy Prime Minister Sir Michael Cullen and veteran advisor Mike Munro. And how did the talks go?
Very positive, thank you.
Official talks won't begin till after the special votes are tallied and the final count revealed at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon.
Until that happens, everything else is just pie in the sky, dreaming and speculation, not worth the air it passes on, and we're not going to engage in that sort of behaviour.
That means still more waiting for the public and for MPs before formal attempts to pull together a government can get underway. But Mr Peters is tiring of reports he's holding the country to ransom.
Well, it's, between the devil and the deep blue sea here. Not in terms of the political parties, but we just can't win. You can't win with the public, you can't win with the media, you can't win with the commentariat.
But given he's got two parties to negotiate with, Winston Peters might be able to chalk up some wins in the negotiating room. He hasn't left himself much time though. He set a deadline of October the 12th for the party to make up its mind, and today said he'll stick to that. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Few New Zealand politicians understand symbolism quite like Winston Peters, and before he met Bill English, before he met Jacinda Ardern, he met with representatives of the Pike River families. Remember, in January, Winston Peters visited the families and their supporters on the west coast at the road leading up to the mine, in which 29 people died. And today, according to Bernie Monk, who lost his son Michael in the mine, his message hadn't changed.
Well, he said exactly the same thing up at the gate. As he said, he's right behind what we're doing. He's going to support us, and it's still a bottom line for him wherever way he goes after these final votes are said. So he's not making a commitment to anything party-wise to us, but we assured him as a family we will support him whichever direction he goes, and it was a really good talk. And this man's been talking the truth to us, and he hasn't veered off it. So we honestly believe that he's going to help us.
So he said re-entry is a bottom line in his coalition negotiations.
Yep, certainly is. Yep, it was very pleasing to hear.
And Bernie, in terms of the kind of re-entry that you are talking about, you're talking about manned re-entry.
That is correct.
And that is what Winston Peters is talking about too when he talks about the bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing that Winston's really upset about is that the robot that's been developed in the Wellington University here was never ever an option for the government, and he can't understand that because they developed that, for Pike River itself, and cannot understand why they just swept things aside and didn't take any notice of the people. And he's going to make sure that this is going to happen, and I'm pretty ecstatic, really.
Who else was there from the Pike families? Bernie, who was with you?
Anna Osborne's here, Sonia Rockhouse, and my wife Kath. We're all here representing the family.
You never stop, do you? You never, that core group of you, there has not been a day in the past 6 years and 11 months in which you've given up, has there?
Well, a lot of these things needed to be done for the country. It cannot be swept under the carpet. That's, a lot of people say, why don't you move on? Or we've moved forward, we've never moved on. We need justice and accountability, and that's another thing I want to touch on, where also today we've been in court cases trying to bring up the case that we brought up against Whittle, why he was never convicted by WorkSafe, etc., and the underhanding that was done there. And this case is moving on, and this is the fourth time that we've had to bring this to court. And the families have done this with the help of the unions and this case is going very well for us. And we mightn't get much from this case today, but the country will. The country will not be just, these corporates can't just walk over people and get people killed in the workplace and paid money and then told to go away and get on with their lives. And that's what's happened to the Pike River families, and we need this to stop happening in New Zealand. And that's probably what we'll gain from this today.
Bernie Munkin will have more on that court case Bernie was talking about later in the program. The Deputy Chair of Auckland's own Finance Committee says it's unacceptable the council blew its wage budget by millions of dollars for the third year in a row and something needs to change. Auckland Council spent $42 million more on staff wages and salaries than it had budgeted for. And the number of staff paid more than $200,000 went up by a third. Zach Fleming has more.
73 people at Auckland Council now earn more than $200,000 a year, up from 55 last year. Across the wider Auckland group, so Council plus Auckland Transport, Watercare, etc., that number went from 155 to 194. Overall, the council's wages bill blew way out, $853 million instead of a budgeted $811 million. Joe Holmes from the Auckland Ratepayers Alliance is livid.
The salaries bill is now 52% of the budget. Core services are just being cut to the bone. Roads have potholes that aren't getting fixed. Parks aren't mowed. The place is just looking generally uncared for at a time when these top bureaucrats are increasing their own salaries and lining their own pockets.
The council refutes this and says it has to compete with the private sector. So I called several recruitment agencies today. None would speak on the record because they were scared of jeopardising their contracts with the council. But they all confirmed council pay is in line with the private sector. Ms Holmes says that's irrelevant though.
If we think we've got skilled people administering Auckland Council at the moment, we're very seriously deluding ourselves. Basically, there is a budget that has to be paid for, and Council has set a budget, and it's very poor leadership from Council, and especially from the Mayor Phil Goff, that this budget has been allowed to blow out in this way.
The Council's Chief Executive, Stephen Towns, said in a statement less than 1% of staff earn more than $200,000 a year, and he says that's in line with the Wellington City Council. He put the $42 million overall wage blowout down to holiday pay errors, redundancies and an increase in staff. Job numbers-wise, across the Auckland Council group there are now more than 10,000 full-time jobs, 193 up from last year. Mr Towns said that was mainly necessary hirings at the Port, City Rail Link and customer service staff. Councillor and Deputy Finance Committee Chairwoman Desley Simpson says a $42 million blowout is unacceptable.
$2 million is not okay, but to have $40 million over, in fact to be blown out on our salary budget for the third year in a row, is very concerning. Council employs one person, our Chief Executive, and I think it's important that our Chief Executive works within the budget and provides good answers to any questions around budgets that don't come in accurately.
She says some of the answers provided by Mr Town are fair.
But overall, I think what hasn't been explained clearly and articulately to give Aucklanders confidence that we are being fiscally responsible is the absolute detail around the blowout.
Nobody I spoke to in Auckland CBD today had that confidence.
Ridiculous. Yeah, ridiculous. Why? They're not accountable. Usually the big salaries in the corporates is because of the accountability. These guys, the equivalency is rubbish.
We have people here working harder, but for them to earn that much, it's pretty crazy, eh? Yeah, it's way too much money.
A stick-to-budget philosophy is, ironically, exactly what the Mayor Phil Goff campaigned on, promising to cut the fat at council and make it run smoother and cheaper. He's issued a please explain over the salary rises. Ms Simpson says the Finance Committee has identified changes that she says will make a difference.
I mean, as a new councillor, I'm concerned that the staff budget has been blown out for 3 years in a row. Now, I can understand the mistake once, but I can't understand it 3 years in a row, and something has to change, and it has to change now.
For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
20 minutes past 5 exactly. Coming up on the program, police named the 10-year-old boy who died in a fire in a derelict building in Hastings earlier this week. And a prankster, a coughing fit, a set failure, and even accusations of plagiarism are what was supposed to be a keynote speech by British Prime Minister Theresa May. It really was a disaster. Don't forget, you can text us on 2101. Aucklanders, we'd love to hear what you make of the Auckland Council's $42 million wage blowout. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz, and our email address is, of course, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. The FBI says the government responsible for Sunday's massacre in Las Vegas spent decades acquiring ammunition and weapons. Police say they've recovered nearly 50 firearms from three locations, including 23 from Stephen Paddock's room at the Mandalay Bay Hotel. 12 of those rifles were fitted with bump stocks, which allow them to be fired as though they were automatic weapons. Paddock's partner, Mary Lou Danley, last night returned from a holiday in the Philippines and is cooperating with the police investigation. And as Sally Murphy reports, she's told the FBI she was totally unaware he was masterminding such a terrible attack.
I am devastated by the deaths and injuries that have occurred, and my prayers go out to the victims and their families.
Lawyer Matthew Lombard reading a statement on behalf of his client, Mary Lou Danley, the girlfriend of Las Vegas gunman Stephen Paddock. The FBI said Danley was a person of interest in their investigation into the mass shooting, which left 58 dead and more than 500 injured. Paddock bought tickets for Danley to travel to the Philippines to visit family a week before the shooting. Her family claims she had no idea he was planning violence. She returned to the United States last night and has been cooperating with police.
I am a mother and a grandmother, and my heart breaks for all who have lost loved ones. I knew Stephen Paddock as a kind, caring, quiet man. I loved him and hoped for a quiet future together with him. He never said anything to me or took any action that I was aware of that I understood in any way to be a warning that something horrible like this was going to happen.
Danley's lawyer said she was concerned Paddock was going to break up with her when he purchased the airline tickets at short notice.
Like all Filipinos abroad, I was excited to go home and see family and friends. While there, he wired me money, which he said was for me to buy a house for me and my family.
Arriving in Las Vegas from Puerto Rico today, US President Donald Trump came face-to-face with victims, families and medical staff.
I just have to tell you that I just met some of the most amazing people. We met patients that were absolutely terribly wounded, and the doctors, the nurses, all of the people at the hospital have done a job that's indescribable.
The University Medical Centre was already full on Sunday night when gunman Stephen Paddock rained terror on Las Vegas, but its director John Filday said staff treated 100 injured and admitted 50 patients.
We couldn't be more proud of the community response. Every hospital took serious patients, everybody took care of them well, and we've exercised our disaster plan in Las Vegas, and it was rolled out flawlessly.
Mr. Trump told media he had left the door open for medical staff who treated victims in the aftermath of the attack to visit the Oval Office if they were ever in Washington. But when asked by a journalist whether America had a gun violence problem, the president refused to answer and would only talk about Stephen Paddock's mental health.
We're looking. I can tell you it's a very sick man. He was a very demented person. We haven't seen that yet, but you will know very soon if we find something. We're looking very, very hard. I'm actually going over to the police department, who likewise, Doctor, have been incredible. Unbelievable. The fact that they were able to locate that zone and get in there, they say 11 minutes, whatever it was, it kept him busy, and he stopped firing because he knew they were coming into that door at some point. I think they did an incredible job.
The president then visited the Las Vegas Police Department, thanking them too for their work.
But I just wanted to come in and say hello and congratulate you. I was a fan before this. You know that. Everyone in this room knows that. a big fan before this, and I guess if you can be more of a fan, I guess I'm even more of a fan now.
Meanwhile, mourners lit candles and laid flowers at a makeshift memorial to the victims of the shooting.
I came to the memorial today to express some love and know that the families and the victims, we are praying for them. We're praying for the first responders, and we're hoping that we could show through our love that hate will not prevail.
I feel a very eerie feeling. I feel deep sadness and shock at what transpired. And you always think that it's never going to happen to those that you love or those that are near you. But to know so many that were there, and to know that Vegas was my town, whether I knew them in person or not, I feel like they were my family and friends.
More than 45 victims from Sunday's massacre remain in a critical condition in hospital. For Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
Amidst the horror of the shooting, the inexplicability, the rush to comprehend, people fell and people ran, but some people stayed. Casey Thompson was one of them. Casey had been an EMT, an emergency medical technician, a form of paramedic, which meant he knew what to do with the wounded. But Paddock was still firing and people were still falling, and Casey chose to risk his life to stay because, like 22,000 other people, he wasn't there as an EMT. He was a country music fan at a country music concert.
Yeah, we go to most every concert, every country concert from SoCal to Arizona to Nevada. And this is our third Route 91 festival. It was the last show. It was the biggest act, so the most people were in there. And we were just having an awesome time. It was one of the best weekends we've had. It's so hard to say that it happened like that. We walked into what is known as a kill box.
And of course, at first, you had absolutely no idea that's what it was, that that's where you were. You were simply at a concert. At the very beginning, people had absolutely no idea what was happening, right?
And I realized we needed to go when the girl in front of me dropped. And I went up to her to see if she needed help, and she was gone. She was shot in the head. It was bad. And then some of the other injuries we saw were like limbs, like just severed, and chest shots and head shots. There was some shots to the face. There were shots to the chin, neck, everywhere on a person's body. We saw it that night.
Casey, you said a little bit earlier, we realised we needed to go. But you didn't go. In fact, you stayed. Why? What made you stay in those circumstances where people all around you were falling?
The instinct. I mean, once I knew my fiance was safe, I was ready to go. My brain kicked in and said, you know what, these people need help, and I'm here to help them. I knew how to treat these people. I knew how to bandage them and stop their bleeding in order to save their lives. And that's what my main focus was. There were still bullets flying in the background. There were still guns going off. And I didn't even care. I was pulling people. I was bandaging people. I was doing CPR on people. I was covering bodies. It was just instinct to keep going.
And you didn't for a moment think, I am at risk and the risk is too great for me to stay here?
Not once. Once I got a second, I called my mom, woke her up. I said, Mom, I'm helping people. I am fine. I'm out of the venue, and I'm going to help people. And that's the only call I made. It was 10 seconds long. And from there, for the next hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, I was helping these people who were shot from head to toe.
And what is becoming more apparent as more and more accounts emerge is that at the beginning, rescue personnel weren't allowed into the high-risk area because the danger was so great. So in fact, for quite a while after the shooting started, it was just concert goers kind of looking after each other.
Yeah, I mean, so we were still in a hot zone. We had no extra help come in for us. When we were pulling people to a location, we were still under fire. You could not see ambulances or fire trucks there helping our location. I'm sure they were out there helping in a distance, but where we were at, it was just ran by citizens. I had, right by my side, I had my buddy Scott, who had no medical background, but he was there getting medical supplies from cop cars from me. He was there doing whatever I needed, holding and wrapping and tying. There was a trauma nurse there, and she was, these are all concert goers. There was a firefighter there. There was people, didn't even know other people, just getting their hands covered in strangers' blood, holding wounds, doing CPR, carrying people. It was all concert goers doing this nature because it was a hot zone. It was a danger zone, and trained professionals that are on duty are not supposed to go in there until it's clear. So without the citizens doing this, the concert goers, the casualties would have been a lot more. I mean, if you some of the videos you see people carrying people on guardrails. We carried people on street signs, caution signs. We carried them against our bodies, over our shoulders, beds of trucks, cars, anything we can get our hands on, we did it.
How many people do you think you carried out or cared for or looked after or checked up on?
Oh, man, it's so hard to count. It was like an hour and 45 minutes of nonstop. I would say at least 70 plus, but I can't say for sure. It could be a lot more. I know I covered at least 5 bodies that did not make it. We went into dark alleys and pulled people out that did not make it to us yet. Back towards the concert. I mean, our setup was only yards away, 50 yards maybe.
I don't know how you did it, Casey. I don't know how you did it.
I don't know either, but I would do it again in a heartbeat. I did it for my family, and every one of those people are my family.
Casey Thompson, who was a concert goer, who, as the bullets rained down on them, stayed to care for people. Lots of feedback coming in on the Auckland Council and its wage bill. This from Susan Grimsdale. I suggest all those councillors getting, I won't use the word earning, over $130,000 or so, be told their income will drop at once by 30%. How many do you think would walk out? I bet almost none. They wouldn't get that kind of money anywhere else. They take the money, but they don't take responsibility. Who has ever come forward acknowledging responsibility for leaky houses? Thank you for all your feedback. We appreciate it. Text 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Coming up on the program, the Kiwis Rugby League World Cup campaign is in disarray after players make a secret pact to play for Tonga. And could Masterton be New Zealand's most beautiful city? We go there. But first, Katrina Batten with the headlines.
Winston Peters says he's in a no-win position and having to choose between National or Labour to govern the country. The New Zealand First Leader met the leaders of the two main parties today in separate quick-fire meetings, National in the morning and Labour this afternoon. Mr Peters says the preliminary talks did not include any discussions around policies, but set out protocol for the official negotiations that will begin after the election results are confirmed and the special vote count is revealed on Saturday. The police say the gunman responsible for the Las Vegas massacre planned it meticulously and spent decades acquiring weapons while he lived a secret life. Stephen Paddock killed 58 people from his sniper's nest in a hotel. The police say 317 of the 489 people injured have been discharged from hospitals. The Chief Executive of the Waikato District Health Board, Nigel Murray, has quit following an investigation into his overspending. The DHB says it's accepted Dr Murray's resignation with immediate effect on the basis he repays the money involved. A Christchurch man has been found guilty of murdering a man whose battered body was found by a Canterbury lake last Anzac Day. Peter Carroll admitted striking Marcus Tucker with a car steering wheel lock, but maintained he never intended to kill him. A hang glider pilot has been flown to hospital after crashing in the Port Hills near Christchurch. Emergency services were alerted to the incident just before 2 o'clock this afternoon. The 47-year-old pilot has broken bones. He went down close to the sign of the Kiwi. The Civil Aviation Authority is investigating. Cordons around an area of Auckland where a person was reported to have a gun have now been lifted. The police were called shortly after 1 this afternoon to Cordo Road in Green Lane. The police are now talking with a person and have yet to decide whether charges will be laid. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 with more news, sport and weather.
Thanks, Katrina. Lots coming up on many of the stories Katrina mentioned in the headlines, including that murder trial in Christchurch. But let's turn to business news now with Jonathan Mitchell. And Jono, welcome. Nice to see you again. Tonight, the financial watchdog talking tough on KiwiSaver providers. Why?
Yes, this is the Financial Markets Authority. They've really put the tough word on providers today. They're saying the level of engagement between a provider and a member is not good enough. It's saying these providers should make sure that their members are in the right type of fund. So this may mean moving them from a default conservative fund into a more growth-orientated one. The Financial Markets Authority says it's willing to take action if needed, use its powers and make recommendations to the government if needed. But if we look at KiwiSaver, the figures themselves, this is data based up to the year to March. 2.7 million people are in KiwiSaver. That's up on the previous year, but more people are willing to switch providers, the so-called churn rate, and this is in the spotlight. We've had new players such as Simplicity come in, say they're offering the best deal, the best rate, the best type of fee, so members are being made more aware that there is competition in the market and they can decide to switch if they want to. The Financial Markets Authority says this is healthy and they expect the level of switching to continue.
Talking of switching, the Superfund plans to splash the cash overseas. What's going on there, Jono?
It's just bought into an Australian beef stud farm for a figure we're not aware of. It's undisclosed, but it's its first investment in the Australian farming sector. It currently has 32 farms here in New Zealand. But we do know that the Superfund plans to spend about $100 million over the next couple of years developing this Australian farm. It's called Palgrove. It has operations in Queensland and further south in New South Wales, around 5,000 cattle. This isn't the end for Australia and the Superfund. It's worth around $35 billion and has some cash to splash as well. It's saying it's looking for more investments in the Australian farming sector, probably outside of cattle, as well as further afield overseas.
Thanks, Jono. The share market reaching a milestone. Is it all very near at 8,000?
It's getting very close. It gained, it's getting close to that symbolic high of 8,000. Might get there by the end of the week. Gained 25 points today to 7,975. That is a new high in itself. And that dollar is at 71.5 US cents, 91.3 Australian.
Jonathan Mitchell joining us live from the Wellington newsroom. Thanks, Jono. The Kiwi Rugby League World Cup campaign is in disarray, with coach David Kidwell admitting he was blindsided by the star forwards Jason Taumalolo's defection to Tonga. Kidwell today named a squad which included 5 debutants for the tournament, which will be jointly hosted by New Zealand, Australia and PNG. But it's missing some big-name players who've deserted the Kiwis. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
Plays the last play. Now let the party begin. The black and white ball is underway.
When the Kiwis won the 2008 World Cup, it was described as a rugby league miracle. The Kiwis, it seems, will need another one if they're to repeat the effort in 2017. David Fusitua, Sio Sioa Takiaho and Manu Ma'u were all in line to join Jason Taumalolo and the Kiwis, but have now pledged their World Cup allegiance to Tonga. Australian media reports have suggested the players made a pact to play for Tonga after Kiwis coach David Kidwell suspended teammates Jesse Bromwich and Kevin Proctor from the World Cup for breaching team protocol earlier this year. Bromwich and Proctor were banned over allegations of buying drugs at a Canberra nightclub following the Kiwis' test loss to Australia earlier this year. David Kidwell says he tried several times unsuccessfully to get hold of Taumalolo to discuss why he was turning his back on the Kiwis.
That's the most disappointing thing. I respect his decision, but I think, a conversation between myself and him would have been a good thing to do. And as far as we were concerned, Jason was part of our World Cup team.
Kidwell's won just 6 of his tests as coach of the national side, and he accepts there was not universal acceptance of his decision to ban Bromwich and Proctor, although he won't resile from it.
Everyone's going to have their own opinion, but at the end of the day, we've made that strong decision for the jersey. And we're trying to build a new Kiwi spirit here, and we're not going to condone that behaviour.
The Tonga coach is Christian Wolfe. He's unaware of Taumalolo's move to Tonga being a rebuke of Kidwell as Kiwis coach.
It certainly hasn't been, any real push from my end. I think Jason's really sort of been the catalyst for it, and he's been the first to jump there, and everyone knew he was going to be picked for New Zealand, but he came out and said that he was going to play for Tonga and gave his reasons why. And I guess it just took one bloke to do that, and particularly a person of Jason's profile, and that certainly made other guys realise that was what they wanted to do as well.
While the defections to Tonga will take a toll on the Kiwis' World Cup title hopes, it certainly adds greater interest to the tournament and plenty of spice to the clash between the two sides in Hamilton early next month. The Kiwis' opening match of the World Cup is against Samoa in Auckland in just over 3 weeks' time. For Checkpoint, Stephen Hewson.
We head now to Christchurch, where a jury in the High Court took less than 3 hours to return a guilty verdict in the trial of Peter John Carroll for the death of Marcus Luke Tucker. In April last year, Carroll viciously and fatally beat Tucker with a metal steering lock. The 36-year-old's body was then wrapped and burnt. The issue, a dispute over a drug debt and a drugs robbery that Tucker hadn't actually committed. Our reporter Katie Gossett was in court.
In this case, there was never a situation whereby Peter Carroll had not killed Marcus Tucker. That was always admitted, but what was in doubt was whether this was a case of murder or manslaughter. Now, what we understand is that Mr. Carroll had said he believed the victim owed him money. He went to his location to threaten him, and he has admitted that he hit Mr. Tucker repeatedly with a metal car steering wheel lock. This was, as I say, repeatedly 5 or 6 times. So he has admitted killing Mr. Tucker, but he claimed that he never intended that he would die. And of course, the Crown has disagreed with this, claiming that Mr. Carroll was indeed intelligent enough to realise that that would be the likely outcome of the injuries inflicted.
And the jury clearly agreed with the Crown. Katie, what was the reaction in court as the guilty verdict was said out loud?
Well, there was quite a packed public gallery, and many of the members of the Tucker family were there. Now, there was an emotional reaction when the guilty verdict was read out by the foreman. There was a sort of an exclamation of yes, and a few people cheered. There was also clearly quite an emotional reaction from some, quite a few tears in the courtroom this afternoon.
So that was reaction inside the court. And Katie, I understand there was a somewhat more formal reaction afterwards.
Yeah, that's right. Look, Belinda Ross, who told us she was the younger sister of Marcus Tucker, came out. She had an entourage of the wider family members. She said they had a short statement to make. They said they wanted to express their thanks and gratitude to everyone who had contributed to the positive outcome. In other words, to everyone who had assisted in getting a guilty verdict. They then asked the media who were gathered there to respect their privacy, but they did say they would have something more to add when Peter Carroll is sentenced on November the 2nd.
It's Katie Gossett talking to us from outside the High Court earlier. It is coming up to 16 minutes to 6. Police have named the 10-year-old boy who died in a fire in Hastings earlier this week. He was Ariki River Baden Mau of Campbell. Ariki was with 2 of his friends in a disused workshop when the fire broke out. He was taken to hospital where he later died. Ariki was a student at the local kura, Te Kura Kaupapa Māori o Ngāti Kahununu ki Heretonga. His teacher, Peter Kereka, told our reporter Shannon Haunui-Thompson that Ariki loved kapahaka.
Well, Ariki was a vibrant and inquisitive student. You know, he always had something to say or comment to make on whether, you know, you wanted to hear it or not. He could make you laugh one minute and infuriate you the next. He was very opinionated, and you know, and he would try and he loved to debate. and he would debate with you until you could prove that you were right and he was wrong. Ariki was passionate in what he believed, and one of his passions that he really did like doing was performing kapa haka, and he was a really, really good student of kapa haka. And it was a shock when we found out that Ariki had passed on, because he was one of our main students in the group, travelled through to Gisborne to represent the Kuta at the Manukura National Primary School kapa haka festival in November. So it was a big loss for our group. Find it really hard that we know we've lost a precious soul, and we really can't explain why it happened to him. We know that Ariki was what we call a tamaiti hautiti. He was a mischief little boy, just like any Māori boys, and we always considered our kids to be descendants of Maui Pōtiki. And to us Maui Pōtiki, he was a mischievous person as well. And so we say our kids, especially our boys, inherited those traits. You know, now that Ariki's gone, we kind of had a look at his life at the Kuta. And it was an eventful life. He had a beautiful reo. He could kōrero Māori really well, but you had to really try and coax it out of him. We take comfort in the thought that he's now joined his best friend, L'Oreal Macready, who died in the last school holidays from an asthma attack, and L'Oreal was very, very similar to Ariki in that he was a tamaiti hautiti also.
And what do you know, or what have you been told, or what happened?
We really haven't been told anything about what happened. We kind of suspect what could have happened, but at the moment we don't really know what happened. I have spoken to one of his friends that was there, and he just says to me that he didn't actually say what they were saying, but he says they shouldn't have been doing what they were doing when they were in the shed, because there was a lot of gas bottles around in there.
That's Ariki's teacher, Peter Kireka, speaking to our reporter Shannon Haunui-Thompson. Ariki's funeral will be on Saturday. It's 12 and a half minutes to 6. It was a defining set piece, a chance for British Prime Minister Theresa May to reassert her dwindling authority, a chance for her to remind the Conservative Party why they'd chosen her for the top job, a chance to inspire, to lead, and even perhaps to make amends for the disastrous decision to call that snap election. All those chances, all of them dashed. It's hard to imagine how it could have gone much worse. The BBC's Laura Koonsberg reports from Manchester on what descended into an excruciating political farce.
A wobble, a wave, and a long, lonely walk. Her colleagues fixing those smiles for the camera.
Why we will never, excuse me, we will never hesitate to act where businesses aren't operating as they should.
A clear of the throat before what was meant to be a comeback. Sorry was not the hardest word at all, but it was the first important one.
We did not get the victory we wanted because our national campaign fell short. It was too scripted, too presidential, and it allowed the Labour Party to paint us as the voice of continuity when the public wanted to hear a message of change. I hold my hands up for that. I take responsibility. I led the campaign, and I am sorry.
For her husband and closest staff, this speech was to take the party by the scruff of its neck and move on. But then...
And it's the Conservative Party.
Just as she was finding her stride, out of the corner of her eye, a piece of paper was proffered. In the buttoned-up guise of a Tory activist, a man interrupted Theresa May. Stand-up comedian Simon Brodkin handing her a fake P45.
Boris, job done there. Give another P45.
To start with, neither the Prime Minister nor anyone else knew what was going on. A stunt during the biggest speech of the most powerful politician in the country.
Leave, please. This gentleman will speak.
With terribly British polite irritation, the cabinet tried to get him to leave.
Boris asked me! But Boris, please say you did this. You asked me to, and now you're denying it.
Before eventually, security guards and chants from the crowd got him out.
What's your name? It was a P45, of course.
You have a P45?
Yes, from Boris.
From Boris Johnson?
Yes.
It was allegedly a joke. Nothing to do with the Foreign Secretary. The man bundled out through the exhibition hall, chased by reporters. There could be trouble for the conference organisers. A man cleared by the tight security here.
Anything to say, sir?
Causing trouble within inches of the Prime Minister, ending up in handcuffs. Back in the hall, an ovation in support to will her on. Those who eye her job swearing loyalty today. Imagine this happening to you on your most important day at work of the year. Her husband comforting rather than celebrating with her at the end. But she led the party into an election she didn't have to call, losing her majority and much of her authority. A precious commodity today's speech was intended to restore.
It's Laura Koonsberg from the BBC. A P45 is, of course, a termination, an official termination of work document. The American Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, has held a surprise media conference to affirm his support for the president, saying he supported his foreign and domestic goals. It comes after reports on television, the network NBC, that Mr Tillerson recently threatened to quit and referred to Donald Trump as a moron. Here's our Washington correspondent, Simon Marks.
Did he or didn't he? That's the question gripping Washington after NBC News reported that Secretary of State Rex Tillerson recently called President Trump a moron. The phrase was apparently used by a furious Secretary of State following a highly political speech that President Trump made in July to the Boy Scouts of America.
Do you remember that incredible night with the maps? And the Republicans are red and the Democrats are blue. And that map was so red, it was unbelievable, and they didn't know what to say.
Like many, Rex Tillerson, himself a big scouting enthusiast, was infuriated by that speech, believing the Scouts were being inappropriately dragged into the political arena. Indeed, the scouting movement eventually distanced itself from the president's remarks. So, NBC and then CNN reported that Mr Tillerson decided to quit, only to be talked out of resigning as Secretary of State after several interventions by Vice President Mike Pence. Mr Tillerson, reading from a very carefully prepared statement, denied that claim vehemently.
The Vice President has never had to persuade me to remain as Secretary of State because I have never considered leaving this post.
But what about the use of the word moron? Asked directly whether he'd disparaged the president in that way, he danced on the head of a pin.
This is what I don't understand about Washington. Again, I'm not from this place. But the places I come from, we don't deal with that kind of petty nonsense.
Now, for a man who denies knowing much about the way Washington works, that sounded like a classic Washington failure to answer a direct question. So everyone assumed that, yes, Mr Tillerson must have used the word moron to describe his boss. Several hours later, his press secretary Heather Nauert had a go trying to set the record straight.
The secretary did not use that type of language to speak about the President of the United States. He does not use that language to speak about anyone.
So she says he didn't say it, but her credibility is in doubt from the get-go, because just last weekend she seemed unaware that North Korea had developed nuclear weapons, and that's something you'd think the State Department spokeswoman would know. That, of course, was the same weekend when President Trump was busy pulling the rug out from underneath Rex Tillerson. He was in Beijing trying to negotiate a solution to the crisis on the Korean peninsula when the president tweeted that he was wasting his time and that diplomacy wouldn't work. On Capitol Hill, Republicans like Senator Bob Corker, once tipped to be President Trump's Secretary of State, had their heads in their hands.
Secretary Tillerson, Secretary Mattis, and Chief of Staff Kelly are those people that help separate our country from chaos.
So perhaps it is comforting that for the moment at least Rex Tillerson remains US Secretary of State. President Trump says he has full confidence in him and dismissed the news reports as made up and bogus. A conclusion that some in Washington think only serves to validate Rex Tillerson's original judgment of him.
Simon Marks reporting from Washington. Lots of feedback coming in on Zach Fleming's story about the wage and salary budget blowout at the Auckland Council until all Aucklanders are all warm and dry, safe homes. The council should pay fairly but not ridiculously. $42 million would go a long way to solving child poverty and homelessness in the city, says one listener or viewer. Thank you. Why would council worry about budget blowout when they can just bleed ratepayers for more money? Anne says, Auckland Council salary blowout, give the CEO a pay rise. Isn't that what we do? And Chris from Thames says, why do CEOs earn so much? Surely someone willing to work for 150k would do just as good a job as one holding out for 1.5 million. What do they actually do? Play golf, pick consultants to come up with good ideas for them? What do they actually do? Asks Chris in capital letters. Thank you for your feedback. You can text us on 2101 and you can email us checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We were just in Washington. Let's head to Wairarapa and the town of Masterton, which has reached the finals of the Keep New Zealand Most Beautiful City Awards, somewhat to the surprise of some locals. It's up against more high-profile spots like Napier and Tauranga, but loyal Masterton dwellers believe their home should indeed get the crown. Why? Ruth Hill went over the Rimatakas from Wellington to check out its charms.
Masterton, home of the Golden Shears shearing competition, is an honest working town, the kind of place you go to do the weekly grocery shop or have the tractor serviced. But now it's making a play for the title of Most Beautiful City. Arapata Samuels, who's 13, is one of Masterton's newest residents, having moved here from Dannevirke just 2 weeks ago. He has no problem believing this is New Zealand's most beautiful city.
Well, I like how
friendly everyone is.
Yeah, how they're friendly and all, and the people here are great, and there's a lot of places where you can buy the stuff that you want.
Beautiful leafy Queen Elizabeth Park, which is over 130 years old, obviously older than its name, is the jewel in the city's crown. Masterton native Tracy Honeysett, who's out with her 3 boys, says Masterton is a great place to bring up kids.
When you move away from the area and then you start to look at what's around for kids and you realise actually what you had here, because we lived in Christchurch for a year and I just found it, there wasn't anything like it.
The park's miniature train is a popular school holiday attraction and run entirely by volunteers. I asked Barry Stroud about his favourite part of Masterton.
Actually, right where I'm standing, making kids happy on a sunny afternoon.
Brad is the train driver today. He moved here 10 months ago after 5 years on the Gold Coast. He admits arriving in winter was a bit of a shock, but he doesn't see why Masterton shouldn't win the top award.
Yeah, why not? I can't see why not. It's got a lot of things going for it.
Willie Ehrlich has a sober appreciation of the town's assets.
It has changed. We've got Burger King here now, KFC and Pizza Hut and stuff. Countdown's getting done up now.
Heidi Stone moved away after school, but like many, she came home.
Masterton's like a magnet. If you live here, you move away, you always come back. So
friends and family.
Yeah.
The editor of the Wairarapa Times Age newspaper, Seamus Boyer, was a bit shocked at the deluge of negative comments on social media after the story broke about Masterton making the final, with one smart aleck asking if all the other cities in New Zealand had been blown up.
A lot of the people will be expats and they've moved away and now they get a chance to have a crack at their old town. One person will feed on the next comment and they'll try and outdo each other in terms of being negative. Is Masterton a perfect place? No. But these awards are about accentuating the positives. And it's great to actually have Masterton in the news nationally in terms of a positive story about the town doing well.
The winners of the Beautiful Awards will be announced at a gala dinner in Hastings next Friday. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
I always think that the Wairarapa is a slightly underrated region in terms of its beauty. There's some magic points, particularly around the south, the farmland. You drive from Featherston towards Martinborough, you get to the point where the valley is beneath you and then the hills on the other side, all the vineyards stretched out. That is a magic view. And then beyond that, south, Cape Palliser, Nawi, fish and chips at the Lake Ferry pub. Magic part of the world, in my opinion. Much worth visiting if you're ever in the neighbourhood. Anyway, that is on behalf of Tourism Wairarapa. I fully expect a bottle of Pinot Noir to arrive in the mail.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. Winston Peters says he's in a no-win position and having to choose between National and Labour to govern the country. The New Zealand First Leader met the leaders of the two main parties today in separate quick-fire meetings. Here's our political reporter May Heron.
The meetings with Jacinda Ardern and Bill English each lasted just 30 minutes. Winston Peters says the preliminary talks did not include any discussion around policy, but instead set out protocols for the official negotiations that will begin after the election results are confirmed and the special vote count is revealed on Saturday. Mr Peters says he's between the devil and the deep blue sea, and whichever way he goes, he won't win with the public, the media, the commentariat, or the people who still believe in first past the post. The New Zealand First Leader says he will stick to his self-imposed deadline of confirming a deal either way by next Thursday. From Parliament, May Heron.
The country's highest court has been told dropping charges against the boss of the Pike River mine arose from an unlawful bargain. Lawyers for Anna Osborne and Sonia Rockhouse, who both lost family members in the 2010 explosion, today asked the Supreme Court to issue a declaration along those lines, but they do not want the charges to be relayed. 12 health and safety charges were brought against the mine boss, Peter Whittle, relating to the deaths of 29 men in the explosion, but they were dropped after more than $3 million was paid to the victims' families. Nigel Hampton, the lawyer for the two women, told the Supreme Court the use of such a payment to end a prosecution was a matter of considerable public importance.
The decision was in pursuance of a bargain, and that bargain was unprecedented in New Zealand legal history, unprincipled and unlawful.
Nigel Hampton QC. The Crown lawyer Aaron Martin said reparation was just one of the factors considered in deciding not to prosecute Peter Whittle. He said WorkSafe had a team of 15 working on the Pike River investigation, and the prosecution file included 92 witness statements and around 600,000 documents. The Supreme Court reserved its decision. The girlfriend of Stephen Paddock, the gunman who slaughtered 58 people in Las Vegas, says she had no idea what he was planning. In a statement, Mary Lou Danley described him as a kind, quiet and caring man. She was questioned by the FBI when she returned to America from the Philippines yesterday. David Willis reports from Las Vegas.
The vexing question for investigators here is what prompted a man with no known history of violence to embark on such a murderous rampage. The man leading the investigation, Sheriff Joe Lombardo, said Paddock had booked a room overlooking another outdoor music festival in the city a week earlier and suggested he might have been planning an earlier attack. Given the quantity of weapons that were found in Paddock's possession after the shooting, the sheriff said it was difficult to believe that he acted alone.
David Willis reporting. 317 of the 489 people wounded or injured in the shooting and the subsequent panic have now been discharged from hospitals. The police say a decision on whether to lay criminal charges over the collapse of Christchurch's CTV building is close. The 6-storey office block pancaked in a matter of seconds during the February 2011 earthquake, claiming 115 lives. People were either crushed to death or died in the fire that followed. A royal commission found major faults with the building's design, which was completed by structural engineers Alan Ray Consultants. Detective Superintendent Peter Reid, who heads the inquiry, says the issues before them are finely balanced. He says the police will now weigh up legal advice before making a final decision that could be several weeks away. The The Senior Doctors Union says it's no surprise the Chief Executive of the Waikato District Health Board has quit following an investigation into his overspending. The DHB says it's accepted Nigel Murray's resignation with immediate effect on the basis he repays the money involved. He's been on leave since mid-July. The Executive Director of the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists, Ian Powell, says senior doctors had raised other concerns about Dr Murray's leadership style, but he says it was ultimately the spending allegations that spelled the end of his tenure.
It was clear from a wee while ago now that there was no way, given the circumstances, he could return to work. The trust and confidence relationship with the board had clearly disappeared.
Ian Powell. A 14-metre whale has been removed from the bow of a container ship in Tauranga Harbour. The dead whale, believed to be a Brutus whale, was partially visible on the vessel which had travelled from Brisbane as it came into harbour yesterday. A dock spokesman, Jeff Millam, says it's not known when the collision occurred and it's hoped an investigation will establish what caused the whale's death.
It was removed off the bow of the boat and secured overnight, and then today we're in the process of moving it to a place where it can be buried.
Jeff Millam. It's 6:05. In sport, the All Blacks have made 5 changes to the starting 15 for their final Rugby Championship test of the year against South Africa in Cape Town on Sunday morning. Nehe Milner-Skudder replaces Waisake Naholo on the right wing. Ryan Crotty comes in at centre for Anton Leonard-Brown. Sam Cane starts at open side flanker ahead of Matt Todd. Sam Whitelock replaces Luke Romano at lock, while Liam Squires starts at blindside flanker. Lema Sopoaga has been named in the reserves, having joined the squad after missing last week's win over Argentina to be at home for the birth of his first child. No matter the outcome of the match, the All Blacks have already wrapped up the championship for another year. The Silver Ferns coach Janine Southby is refusing to let the fact New Zealand haven't won the Constellation Cup for 5 years halt her experimentation. The first match of the 4-test series is tonight in Auckland. But for Southby, the priority remains next year's Commonwealth Games, and she says while there'll be less experimentation than in the recent Quad Series, which New Zealand won when they trounced Australia in the tournament decider, she's still fine-tuning her squad.
Look, we don't want it at the point where the girls don't know whether they're Arthur or Martha either, so we're certainly very conscious of making sure that all our decisions are very clear for the players and they know exactly what that means for them. So, we're certainly working with that. But the good thing is we do have flexibility and we've got players who can play in more than one position, which is great. Tonight's match starts at 7:45. That's the news.
On Nights Tonight, Ally McBride is a sketch biologist and has won a Fulbright scholarship to travel here to New Zealand to sketch endangered seabirds, penguins, storm petrels, shearwaters, shags, gulls, gannets, mollymawks and more, to tell stories about New Zealanders' extraordinary efforts to save these species in the seabird capital of the world. And our electronic music culture vulture is Paul Barrington. He's taking a trip hop, and there's more after 7 tonight on Nights, RNZ National. Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, fine spells and isolated showers. Waikato to Taranaki and Taupo, including Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods with a few showers, more frequent during the afternoons and evenings. Isolated heavy showers possible today. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, increasing fine breaks today. The odd shower developing later tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, a few showers, clearing most places this evening, mainly fine tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, fine breaks but isolated showers as well. Patchy rain developing later. Apopo, I'm getting sick of saying tomorrow, so I'm going to say Apopo. Canterbury becoming fine this afternoon. Patchy rain developing later. Apopo. Otago and Southland, mainly fine. Scattered rain developing later. Apopo. Bulla to Fiordland, mainly fine but a few showers for Bulla. Rain or showers spreading elsewhere. Apopo. Thank you, John. And for the Chatham Islands, fine breaks. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Kia ora, Katrina. Yeah, there was way too many tomorrows in that forecast, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's not looking great for Apopo.
Thank you very much. Let's return to one of the topics we began the program with tonight, and that was Pike River. We talked to Bernie Monk, who met with Winston Peters. Winston Peters says mine re-entry is a bottom line. Well, Bernie Monk also talked about a court case. This is it. 2 women who lost family members in the Pike River mine explosion are continuing their legal fight to have someone held accountable for what happened. Someone. Today, Anna Osborne and Sonia Rockhouse asked the country's highest court to reconsider the Crown's decision not to prosecute the former mine boss, Peter Whittle. Their lawyer told the Supreme Court there was an element of coercion about the decision to drop the charges in return for a reparation payment to victims of the disaster. However, the Crown said reparation was just one of the matters considered when the charges were dropped. Our court reporter Anne-Marie May was at today's hearing.
12 health and safety charges were laid against Peter Whittle over the deaths of 29 men in the explosion, but they were dropped after more than $3 million was paid to the victims' families. Nigel Hampton QC, the lawyer for Anna Osborne and Sonia Rockhouse, told the Supreme Court today the question of whether such a payment could be used to end a prosecution was a matter of considerable public importance.
The decision to offer no evidence and allow the 12 health and safety charges against Mr Whittle to be dismissed was in pursuance of a bargain, and that bargain was unprecedented in New Zealand legal history, unprincipled and unlawful.
Nigel Hampton said Pike River Coal Limited had been ordered to pay reparation but could not because it had gone into liquidation, so the offer made on Mr Whittle's behalf was simply clearing a debt already imposed on the company and not reparation from Mr Whittle at all. He quoted from correspondence between the Crown and Mr Whittle's lawyers, suggesting reparation was only viable if Mr Whittle didn't have the legal costs of preparing for trial.
If this cannot be achieved, the proposed payment will not represent any saving over the cost of proceeding to trial, and in that event, whatever the outcome, I believe that the families will not receive anything like the amount offered.
Nigel Hampton said his clients were seeking a declaration from the Supreme Court that dropping the charges arose from an unlawful bargain. However, the Crown lawyer Aaron Martin said WorkSafe New Zealand had a team of 15 working on the Pike River investigation, and the prosecution file included 92 witness statements and around 600,000 documents. He said paying reparation was just one of the factors in deciding not to prosecute Peter Whittle.
The unavailability of at least 14 prosecution witnesses and other reluctant witnesses, the likelihood that briefs might not be admissible, likely expert contests, and the indications from the defence that a lengthy and complex pre-trial arguments would be raised.
Aaron Martin said the prosecutors also had to consider how much more of their finite resources they should put into further legal action when the company had already been convicted.
You had had the comprehensive Royal Commission report. The question is how much further in terms of advancing the objectives of the legislation is to be achieved through putting more resource into this case, and it was going to be very considerable resource.
The court reserved its decision. For Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
Just as an aside before we move on, we have tried repeatedly over a sustained period to get an interview with Peter Whittle about this court case, about the compensation, about his sense of responsibility or otherwise for what occurred at Pike River in November 2010. He never returns our emails, he never answers our calls, and he never gets back to us in any way, shape or form at all. The girlfriend of the Las Vegas gunman is being questioned by FBI investigators as they hunt for clues in what sparked the worst mass shooting in modern American history. Stephen Paddock killed 58 people and injured more than 500 when he opened fire on concertgoers from his high-rise hotel room before killing himself. His girlfriend, Mary Lou Danley, who returned to the US yesterday, is a person of interest in the investigation, but her sisters in the Philippines say she has a clean conscience. She had no prior knowledge of the attack. However, investigators in Las Vegas say they are not ruling out that Paddock had help during his long preparation for his shooting. CNN's Sarah Cinder has more.
At FBI headquarters in Los Angeles, Danley was locked behind closed doors, undergoing intense questioning from investigators. Their hope that she may hold the key to what drove Paddock to Sunday's horrific mass shooting. Danley tonight issuing a statement through her attorney.
It never occurred to me in any way whatsoever that he was planning violence against anyone.
Danley's ex-stepdaughter had only kind words for her.
She is a good and gentle person. I know she has to be devastated by what has happened.
Danley met Paddock several years ago. She worked at the Atlantis Casino Resort in Reno. He was a high-stakes gambler. Paddock's brother talked about what their life was like.
He loved her, and
you know. She was a hostess at the hotel where we gambled, where Steve was a big fish at the Atlantis for a long time.
Danley had been married to Gary Danley since 1990. Their divorce finalized in 2015. Danley's sisters say they're heartbroken by the shootings and spoke to Australian television.
Mary Lou seems madly in love with Steve, you know?
But 2 weeks before the shooting, Danley's sisters say Paddock handed her what he called a cheap ticket to the Philippines. The search for Danley was complicated as it spanned several different countries. First stop, Tokyo. From there to Manila, landing on September 15th. On the 22nd, Danley flew to Hong Kong. Then, 3 days later, back to Manila for a week before returning to Los Angeles last night.
Imagine if she was there, if he took his life. He would definitely take my sister's life as well because she's there. What he done here is he spared my sister's life. He sent her away so that he can plan what he's planning without interruptions. In that sense, I thank him for sparing my sister's life.
During that time, Paddock wired $100,000 to the Philippines. Eric Paddock told our Orlando affiliate he believes his brother sent the money to, quote, take care of Mary Lou. But Danley's sisters don't describe Paddock as a caring man, and they're angry at the pain and mystery he's left behind.
Very quiet. He's not sociable. He escaped and leave us here putting the puzzles together.
That report from CNN. Auckland Council has been criticised from within for blowing its wage budget. The council spent $42 million more over the 16-17 financial year than it had budgeted for. The third year in a row it's overspent, and the number of employees earning more than $200,000 a year across the Auckland group. So Council plus Watercare and Auckland Transport increased by a quarter. Chief Executive Stephen Town says there are valid reasons for the blowout and for the increase, but some of his own staff disagree. Orake and Deputy Chair of the Council's Finance Committee, Desley Simpson, spoke to Zach Fleming.
Certainly not okay. In fact, $2 million is not okay, but to have $40 million over, in fact, to be blown out on our salary budget for the third year in a row is very concerning. Council employs one person, our Chief Executive. And I think it's important that our Chief Executive, works within the budget and provides good answers to any questions around budgets that don't come in accurately. I know this morning the Mayor has written to the Chief Executive. He's had discussions with him earlier, but he's written to him officially now, asking him to explain a number of issues around this.
Do you accept the reasons that the Chief Executive, Stephen Town, gave for the blowout? So holiday pay errors, redundancies and extra staff hirings?
Yeah, I think some of the concerns there are concerns for me around the reasons, without a doubt. I mean, unbudgeted redundancies, we need to look at that, whether we're in line with what the Auditor General has suggested around that. The Holidays Act, look, I believe that was a technical problem around that, so potentially that's got credibility. And also there was some extra staff put on by, for example, the Ports of Auckland, which we have no control over. They bought a couple of extra companies. So, look, there are some answers to this. But overall, I think what hasn't been explained clearly and articulately to give Aucklanders confidence that we are being fiscally responsible is the absolute detail around the blowout. Everyone identifies and understands that we need good staff and we need to remunerate them fairly. But we must be able to answer credibly, I believe, the question of whether we are structured to provide the very best value for money and that council salaries are not disproportionately high.
So learnings for next year, do we need to budget better, or do we need, what do we need to change? What do we need to learn from this?
I think there's a lot of learnings to be had from the annual report around this. And you've got to remember, of course, this is a budget done by the Len Brown Council. This is not a budget that was reported on against the Phil Goff budget. So without a doubt, both the Mayor and certainly I know the Chair of the Finance Committee and myself have come from some concerns, and we are looking at some changes that will, I'm sure, be beneficial to the financial running of this city. I mean, as a new councillor, I'm concerned that the staff budget has been blown out for 3 years in a row. Now, I can understand a mistake once, but I can't understand it 3 years in a row, and something has to change, and it has to change now.
Tesley Simpson speaking to Zach Fleming. A stabbing attack on a bus driver in Auckland last night has highlighted the need for better security, including cameras and driver cages. The bus drivers' union says the driver is now in a stable condition in Middlemore Hospital. Jessie Chang reports.
The bus driver was rushed to hospital with critical injuries to his stomach and neck after the stabbing on Browns Road in Manurewa yesterday evening. The Crime Prevention Group, an organisation against crime in Auckland, says there were also other passengers on the Murphy-operated bus when the driver was attacked. Its president, Sunny Korshall, says the driver has not been well enough to talk to family members, and meanwhile his community is in shock.
It's a very traumatic and very serious incident for the family and friends and to the whole community. There shouldn't be any place for these kind of crimes to happen in the society.
The bus coordinator for First Union, Rudd Hughes, says bus drivers are concerned about their safety. He says a health and safety survey by the union earlier this year found drivers felt verbal and physical assaults had been increasing. Mr Hughes says the survey recommended that security cameras be installed in all buses.
We know that in the taxi industry, where cameras have been introduced, assaults on drivers has gone down markedly. That would be a pretty simple solution that wouldn't be overly costly to the companies.
The bus that the driver was stabbed in did have a CCTV camera, and Auckland Transport says that footage has been provided to police. About 50% of buses operating for Auckland Transport have security cameras installed, although 100% should have them by September next year. Mr Hughes says that's not good enough and something needs to be done now. He's also calling for extra safety measures to be put in place, such as cages. For example, security screens are in the process of being installed on every passenger bus in Victoria and Australia. But the Vice President of the Bus and Coach Association, Cheryl Otway, doesn't believe that cages should be installed. She says wider safety measures that protect both drivers and passengers should be considered.
You've got to make sure that you're not just making your driver safe, you're making sure that everybody that has boarded your bus, you have a responsibility to make sure they're safe too.
Cheryl Otway says the Bus and Coach Association is currently holding its annual conference with bus operators across the country, and safety for passengers and drivers will be a top discussion point. She says bus drivers need training about how to respond to attacks, something the police could be involved in.
I think it's really important for the police to engage. They're the ones that can tell us what's happening out there, what new things are appearing, what the statistics are like, and what we should be looking for.
A 15-year-old teenager appeared in the Manukau Youth Court today, charged with having a pocket knife, intent to cause grievous bodily harm and wounding the bus driver. The young man has been remanded in custody and will reappear in court later this month. For Checkpoint, Jessie Chang aho.
Single-use plastic bags might slowly be on their way out, but binning the bag may take a bit of getting used to for many New Zealanders. Countdown announced yesterday that it would phase out the plastic bags by the end of next year, saying it will result in 350 million fewer of them ending up in rubbish tips and the environment every year. And while many are welcoming that move, Nita Blake-Person reports that consigning the bags to the scrap heap may take a bit of getting used to for some people.
We use them for rubbish. I put clothes in them.
For storing all sorts of unmentionable articles.
When I take the dog for a walk.
When the kids are going swimming, I'll tell them to take a plastic bag to put their wet clothes in.
From rubbish bags to picking up pet waste, a protective measure against leaking drink bottles and exploding lunches, plastic bags have plenty of uses. When I visited Countdown's Mount Roskill store today, most trolleys were packed full of plastic bags. While some shoppers were adamant they would get a second life, others said they would be going straight to the tip.
I just collect them and then put them out in the rubbish.
I just throw them out because I end up with too many.
Don't use these plastic bags. I need to do anything in my house.
It's those bags, the ones that are used for only a few minutes before being thrown away, that can cause massive harm to the environment. Sustainable Coastlines has been collecting rubbish from New Zealand's beaches for 9 years, and co-founder Camden Howard says about 7.5% of what they've recovered, around 157,000 items, is plastic bags.
Absolutely addicted to plastic. It surrounds everything that we do, often everything that we eat. It's in our everyday lives far more than it needs to be.
Daughter Sigurd is an educator with the Tamaki Waste Reduction Action Project.
Recycle, but this is what I take to the supermarket for,
Here in her Glendowie home, she puts out a small ice cream container of waste every few weeks. She uses shopping bags made out of recycled curtains and old parachutes and sews small mesh bags for fruit and veggies.
Honestly, I never think about that I don't have plastic bags. I'm original from Denmark, and when I was a child, they introduced like a charge for a plastic bag. So I've sort of grown up with plastic bag is expensive, that you pay quite a lot of money for them in the supermarket, and I don't think it's a big deal.
Ms Sigurd has a range of alternatives to using plastic bags around the home, such as making bin liners out of newspaper, replacing plastic with glass and Tupperware for food storage, and she says waterproof bags can be made to carry kids' wet togs.
You just get used to it like anything. It's just that transition that you need to change your habit, and then when you've done it, it's easy.
Sustainable Coastlines' Camden Howard says Countdown's ban is a direct result of consumer demand and people like Ms Sigurd making those changes. He wants to see more businesses moving away from plastic, and with the attention on plastic bags for the moment, he says straws and other single-use plastics also need to go.
I'd love to see consumers rejecting bottled water particularly. That seems an absolute farce, but that's become a huge market in New Zealand.
A survey by the country's other major supermarket chain, Foodstuffs, on whether a charge should be introduced for their bags is due to finish on Sunday. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Cornita Blakeperson, TNA.
Thank you, Nita. It's 26 minutes past 6. The Silver Ferns open their Constellation Cup campaign against arch rivals Australia in Auckland tonight. This is netball if you're not much of a sports fan. The 4-match series is the last time the two sides will meet before next year's Commonwealth Games. And the Ferns are coming off the back of a shock but excellent 10-goal win over Australia in the recent Quad series last month. Certainly a shock to Australia. Our sports reporter Matt Chatterton is at the Spark Arena where tonight's match is being played. Hi, Matt. The Aussies will be smarting like sunburn after that Quad series result. What are you expecting tonight?
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate way to put it, John. I can imagine that the Aussies will be coming out with a lot of fire tonight after what happened last month in Invercargill. They'll be looking to, I guess, try and exploit Kelly Jury, the young defender, and the Silver Ferns that wreaked havoc on Caitlin Bassett, Australia's top shooter, last month. They would have done their homework and they'll come out firing tonight. Yeah.
I think it's
Matt, we can see you and you look magnificent, but we can't hear you very well. So we are going to phone you, brother, and we're going to forfeit the joy of having you on camera for the excellence of actually being able to hear what you're going to say. So you hang up and we will call you. Yes, the Silver Ferns really did go into that Constellation Cup. Sorry, this is the Constellation Cup. They really did go into that Quad series final against the Aussies as underwhelming underdogs. I mean, no one except them clearly thought they were going to do it. The Aussies were just super confident. In fact, the Australian narrative around that game, I mean, the All Blacks do this. It was not how much they were going to win by, whether they were going to win, but how much. And then, by golly, that was turned on its head. Matt, have we got you?
Yep, sure do.
We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you. So the Australians obviously have a point to make tonight, but the thing is, the Silver Ferns now know they can do this, right? They will be feeling confident too. It's going to be a cracker of a game.
Yeah, well, I mean, back when the Australasian netball competition, Trans-Tasman netball competition split late last year, at the start of this year, New Zealand made a big effort of talking about how they wanted to get back to playing their New Zealand game, and that is in fact what we have seen since that split has occurred, and they're playing just themselves in the domestic netball competition. And I think it's sort of taken Australia a bit by surprise as to how well they've been able to pick it up so quickly again. So Australia is sort of having to come back and sort of reevaluate what it is New Zealand bring to the new international netball scene, and I'm sure we'll see a very tight match tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. We saw you before, and there wasn't any crowd in there, but I hear they're expecting a bumper crowd at Spark Arena for tip-off tonight.
Yes, that is correct. Unfortunately, the doors don't open till 6:30.
Oh, right, okay, so that's why there's no one there, Matty. Thank you.
Yeah, there will be no one was there, but yes, we are expecting a bumper crowd, as you pointed out. Given what happened last month in Invercargill, the crowds will want to come out and see another strong performance from the New Zealand Silver Ferns.
Matty, I'm remembering back to the Commonwealth Games final. Was it in Delhi when the Silver Ferns beat Australia to win the gold medal there? That went from memory, and this is 7 years ago. My brain is working with all the acuity of a sieve at the moment, but that went into extra time. There is something really exciting about contests between these two countries on the netball courts, isn't there? That both teams so passionately give a damn, and they're great encounters, aren't they?
They are indeed, and I think unfortunately over the sort of past 7 years since those Commonwealth Games, the competition has become a little more favoured to Australia, and New Zealand has been unable to sort of be as competitive as they could be. But now that they aren't playing each other as regularly, there's a bit more intrigue to the competition and a bit more competitiveness, which is fantastic to see for international netball.
Matt Chatterton live from Spark Arena, where the game is later tonight, ending checkpoint for this evening. Thank you, everyone, for being with us.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Winston Peters says he's in a no-win position and having to choose between National and Labour to govern. The Supreme Court has been told dropping charges against the Pike River mine boss arose from an unlawful bargain. The girlfriend of the Las Vegas gunman says she had no idea what he was planning. The Senior Doctors Union says it's no surprise the chief executive of the Waikato DHB has quit following an investigation into his overspending. And a Christchurch man has been found guilty of murdering a man whose body was found battered and burnt.